Louis XIV, a life of excess and hidden pleasures in Versailles. Louis XIV, known as the Sun King, was a monarch so arrogant that he even compared himself to the sun. His power was so great that the nobility submitted to his will. His insatiable desire for greatness extended to all aspects of his life. Love, war, art, and especially the construction of the Palace of Versailles. He built a palace so spectacular that it overshadowed any other on earth, raising it in a swamp infested with mosquitoes to show that his will surpassed nature itself. If this is your first time on the channel, subscribe now so you don't miss any important content about the darkest chapters of our history. The story of Versailles begins in 1661 with a celebration organized by Nicolas Fouquet. The Minister of Finance, Fouquet, hoping to win the favor of the young king, prepared an extravagant celebration at his splendid palace, Vaux-le-Vicomte. However, Louis XIV's vanity did not allow anyone to overshadow him, and the day after the party, Fouquet was imprisoned for embezzlement, and his legacy was destroyed. Louis XIV then decided to build an even bigger and more splendid palace than Fouquet's. The construction of Versailles was monumental, as the place was originally a rural region with forests and swamps. Louis XIV transformed a modest hunting lodge into a wonder of luxury, moving trees from other regions to create the desired landscape. After 17 years of construction, Louis XIV ordered all the French nobility to move to Versailles. This decision was not a mere whim but a strategy to control and watch over the nobility, who could conspire against him. Louis XIV, who had lived through the civil wars known as the Frondes, understood the importance of keeping his enemies close to prevent them from gaining power in their lands and fortresses. Thus, the Palace of Versailles became the center of power, luxury, and desire in Europe, and Louis XIV managed to turn it into an eternal party for all its inhabitants, securing his place as one of the most influential and extravagant monarchs in history. Meanwhile, the nobility had their own territories, personal armies, and influence. During the reign of the Sun King, France became an absolutist monarchy where all powers rested on the king's figure. Louis XIV thus had the freedom to carry out everything he proposed, and he did it in a grand way. To put this into perspective, during his father Louis XIV's reign, the French crown had an army of 3,000 men. Under Louis XIV's reign, the French army reached the astronomical figure of 400,000, making France the largest military power in Europe. To talk about life in Versailles, it is necessary to delve into Louis XIV's personality, the life, customs, and the way things were done in the palace, which reflected the king's character. In the court of the Sun King, parties and events seemed endless. There was a banquet every night, 3 soirees with music and dancing a week, a daily hunt, and a multitude of spectacular events such as ballets, poetry recitals, operas, and more. Louis XIV participated in ballet and plays, showcasing his dancing talent, a skill of which he was very proud, as well as his legs, which stood out in many of his portraits as the Star King from which he had taken his symbol. Louis XIV was at the center of all exhibitions of luxury, extravagance, grandeur, elegance, and sometimes eccentricity. Privacy did not exist in the court, which was surrounded by people 24 hours a day. People eager to win his favor and fearful of making mistakes that could lead to the monarch's disdain or even indifference. Louis XIV was so revered that one of the greatest honors at court was to be part of the levee, the royal morning audience, where courtiers observed the king while he got up, washed, and changed his clothes. Louis XIV hated weakness, and showing any sign of doubt or insecurity was inadmissible. However, one could not appear overly confident, as that could seem presumptuous or arrogant. Disrespect or lack of education was carefully monitored at court. Although the king was calm, he was cold and few in words, and he abhorred those who took too many liberties in his presence. The nobles, forced to live in Versailles, tried to win the king's favor and affection at all times. Louis XIV's first love came at the age of 12 with Marie Mancini, a young niece of Cardinal Mazarin. As the heir to the throne, Louis could not marry the niece of a cardinal, so his mother arranged his marriage to Infanta Maria Teresa of Spain. Despite being married, Louis XIV was not a man of just one woman, which deeply marked his reign. It is believed that he had between 17 and 22 children, many named Louis or Louise in honor of his father. His first child was born from a relationship with one of the palace servants, but then he began having lovers among the nobility, one of the most remembered being Louise de la Valliere, who was his preferred lover for much of his life. The affair between Louise de la Valliere and the king was an open secret until the death of Louis's mother, Queen Anne of Austria. Louis XIV, who was already an incurable womanizer, intensified his libertine and promiscuous lifestyle after his mother's death. A week after her death, the king attended mass accompanied by his two women, his wife and his mistress, both pregnant at the same time. Maria Theresa had 6 children, of whom only the eldest lived to adulthood, while Louise de la Valliere gave him 4, 2 of whom survived long enough to receive noble titles. Not content with having 2 of the most desired women in France, Louis XIV began a new relationship with Madame de Montespan, with whom he had 7 more children, and who became his new favorite. Despite his affairs, Louis XIV respected his wife and provided her with luxuries and comforts worthy of a queen, keeping his marital vows. Madame de Montespan received a suite of 20 rooms in the palace, 7 more than the queen's own suite. Although Versailles was built to exalt the luxury and beauty of the French high society, living in the palace had a dark side. The court was a dangerous place, and finding the balance between catching the king's attention without appearing threatening was difficult. Earning his ire and disdain could be terrifying. Moreover, Versailles was full of nobles willing to do anything to win the sovereign's favor, even eliminating potential rivals. During Louis XIV's reign, Versailles was the scene of several mysterious deaths, especially of young women prone to drawing attention. One of the most notable cases was the sudden death of the Duchess Marie Angelique de Cour, who passed away at the age of 21 and, according to many rumors, had been poisoned by Madame de Montespan. Another similar case was the death in 1712 of the Duke and Duchess of Burgundy, aged 27 and 30, respectively. Today, many historians believe that all these deaths were caused by natural diseases that medicine at the time could not treat, such as smallpox. In any case, the death of young Marie Angelique de Cour damaged Madame de Montespan's reputation, and she was quietly accused of murder, even of practicing witchcraft, black magic, and human sacrifices in an attempt to manipulate and control the king. Louis XIV, a very deep and reflective person, over time and with age, left behind his libertine and womanizing phase, giving way to a more religious and spiritual Louis. Even the captivating Madame de Montespan began to lose her charms and become less attractive to the king, something natural due to the passing of years and the numerous pregnancies she endured. Madame de Montespan was a married woman, and the king began to worry about the negative effects that their relationship could have on his image. After the death of his wife, Queen Maria Theresa, the Sun King found a new mistress, Madame de Maintenon, a woman from a lower class who had been the governess of several of the monarch's children and was known for being pious, quiet, and exceptionally intelligent. Due to her understated profile, she was likely underestimated by Madame de Montespan or any other of the many aspirants to become the king's new favorite. Despite not being ostentatious, Louis XIV ended up admiring the modesty and other qualities of Madame de Maintenon to the point of falling in love with her. The couple married years later in a discreet ceremony, as a marriage between the king and a woman of Maintenon's rank would not have been well received. From then on, the king only offered his new wife something none of his predecessors could claim: his fidelity, at least in a relative sense. Throughout his long life, Louis XIV ruled with authority and strength, controlling every important aspect of his people's lives. However, the last years and days of the Sun King served as a metaphor for his title. During the last 3 decades of his reign, France was embroiled in brutal wars that led to countless deaths, misery, and popular discontent. It is said that, at times, the Sun King locked himself away alone to cry about the way things had turned out. The final act began on August 10, 1715, when the king started feeling a sharp pain in his left leg. The court's chief doctor, a man named Jean-Baptiste Fagon, claimed it was just a passing illness, an opinion very different from that of George Marshall. 11 days later, upon noticing that the pain hadn't subsided, Marshall found a black spot on the king's foot. It was gangrene. Over the next 23 days, the Sun King agonized, decaying alive, surrounded by such a strong and repulsive odor as death itself. Have you visited the majestic palace of Versailles, or would you like to? I'd love to hear your opinion. If you've reached the end and learned something new from our stories, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Together, we can discover and remember the truths that history often tries to hide.